right, so most of you have read this book, Where the Wild Things Are. Who has read this book? Most of you. So, who has not read this book? Okay, well, we're going to read it together, okay? So, everyone's ears need to be open so you can hear. It says on top, Where the Wild Things Are. Where the Wild Things Are is the what of the book? Title. Where the Wild Things Are would be our title. Then it says Story and Pictures by Maurice Sendak. Who is Maurice Sendak? Raise your hand if you could tell me who that is. Sophia. The illustrator or the writer? The illustrator or the illustrator and the writer? Both, right? Because it says and. So this means one person wrote the story and also did all the pictures. Go sit down, please. Okay, so we're going to start the book. Yes. Yes. Okay. So let's go ahead and start Where the Wild Things Are. I'm going to sit here so that you guys are able to see the pictures and I'm able to flip the book. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, Where the Wild Things Are. Okay. So it says, the night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind. What would the word mischief mean? Abigail. Trouble. So Max is making trouble. What does it look like he's doing in the picture to make trouble?
He's hammering a nail into the wall.
He's hammering a nail into the wall. Is that a good idea?
No.
Probably not.
Yeah,
And another, what is he doing on this page?
he's chasing his dog.
He's chasing his dog. What is he chasing his dog with?
A fork.
A fork. Is that a good idea?
No. No, you might get
It's
right here.
right, Cole. You might get it in his eye, and we don't want to get it in his eye.
Oh, K-I-L-L-S.
Yes. His mother called him Wild Thing, and Max said, I'll eat you up. So he was sent to bed without eating anything. Uh-oh. So he was sent to bed without eating anything. So that means he got no what? Dinner. He was sent to bed without having any dinner. Why was he sent to bed without having any dinner, Abigail?
He was being a bat.
Because he wasn't being nice. He was being too, what was the word? Mischievous. That night, in Max's room, a forest grew. So in his room, it's starting to grow a forest. What shows us that a forest is growing? What's growing? Sydney.
The trees.
The trees are starting to grow in his room.
The thing is good that some of the trees are growing on the carpet, they're not going onto it.
You're right.
On it, which is weird.
Good observation. Some of them are growing on the carpet instead of under. So that it looks like they don't have roots. And grew. So it says and grew. Does that mean that there are more trees or less trees?
More trees.
More trees. So now his room is looking more like a what? A forest or a jungle, right? And grew until his ceiling hung with vines and the walls became the world all around. So in this picture, Sophia, do you see any of his bedroom left, or is it only a forest? That's a good observation. So Sophia said that she sees only forest, but that the leaves might have been his bed. Possibly. You're right. Jimmy?
I still see the moon.
Oh, that's another good observation. If we flip back, we see the moon outside of his bedroom window. And when we flip to the page where it's now all forest, the moon is still there.
I see a bed.
And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through the night and day. So if something is private, what does that mean?
It's only for like
Jola. Jola.
It's only for one person.
If something is private, that means it's only for one person. So this boat, a certain person. So this boat is only for Max. And in and out of weeks and almost over a year to where the wild things are. So this is where we first start to see where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth. What does it mean to gnash your teeth?
Oh,
Cole, what would it mean to gnash your teeth?
I think it means like do this, make your like this.
Right, like Tatum, gnashing your teeth is kind of like grinding your teeth like this. So that's what they're doing. Right, so they're grinding their teeth like this.
That's what my brother does.
And rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws.
Wow.
Till Max said, "Be still," and tamed them with a magic trick. So if he was able to tame the wild things, what does that mean? He was able to what? Isabella? Kind of like trick them, or maybe Jimmy? Train them, control them. He was able to train them using his magic trick. And his magic trick says, of staring into all their yellow eyes without blinking once. And they were frightened and called him the most wild thing of all. And they made him what of the wild things? King. How do you know he's the king? He has a what on his head? He has a crown on his head. Oh yeah, and he also has a staff as well. And now, cried Max, let the wild rumpus start. What is that word? What's a rumpus? Yes. Okay, go ahead. Maybe you're right. Maybe that was his bed where he is sitting. We'll have to check and see when we go back. Now let's look at the word rumpus. Zachary, what do you think a rumpus would mean?
I was thinking about the moon.
Close, yeah. Tatum, what do you think?
A circus?
Kind of like a circus or a party. A rumpus could be like a party.
No, I meant to say, wait.
So here they are, look at having their party together. We have King Max, the king of the wild things, and they're all looking at the moon together. And what do you think that they're doing here? Who was what? Let me see, one person who could tell me what they think that they're doing in this picture. If you were using your imagination, like Max did, to go to this forest, what do you think that they're doing? Sydney, what do you think they're doing? They're climbing through the trees. Cole, did you want to add something about what they're doing in the trees?
I was going to say that they're swinging in the trees.
So they're swinging in the trees. They're kind of like monkeys, right? Except much bigger. Yes, what do you think they're doing in the trees?
Well, I was thinking of something different.
Yes.
I think the wild animals are just his family.
That they're like his family. They trust him as his family. Oh, that's a good observation.
His imagination.
So he said he's using his imagination. So that means he's pretending that these wild things are actually his new family. And here's our next illustration. What do you think that they're doing in this page? Jola, what do you think they're doing?
I think they're like marching.
You think they're marching in a what?
Parade.
Maybe they're marching in a parade for Max.
Do you like one of those things that they do like this?
Oh, like a cha-cha line? Now stop, Max said, and sent the wild things off to bed without their supper, just like he got sent to bed without his supper. And Max, the king of all the wild things, was lonely and wanted to be where someone loved him best of all. Oh, so now he's with the wild things, but who does he feel lonely for? His what? Probably his parents and his family. Then, all around from far away across the world, he smelled good things to eat. So he gave up being king where the wild things are. But the wild things cried, "Oh, please don't go. We'll eat you up, we love you so." Uh-oh. Would you want to be eaten up?
No.
And Max said, "No!" The wild things roared their terrible roars and gnashed, which means grinding, right? Their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. But Max stepped onto his private boat, which we said is his own boat, and waved goodbye.
Bye. And was he like this?
And sailed back over a year and in and out of weeks and through a day and into the night of his very own room, where he found his what waiting for him? Who can raise their hand and tell me what they see waiting for him in his room? Abigail. His supper. And supper, Abigail, is another word for what? Dinner. So was he really sent to bed with no supper?
No. Oh, I have a connection.
And it was still hot.
I have a connection.
Yes, what is it?
One time on also they had this like this family night thing. It's like TW when the beast sleep today.
Uh-huh.
Well, she gets on the island and it's actually her birthday, and her imaginary friend just gives her this ticket. And just like he had his own private boat, she had his own private boat.
So you did make a good connection. So she had her own private boat and he had his own private boat.
And then when she went to the island, they said we'll eat her. And then she sold them the ticket. Then she became queen. She got bored. She tried to leave. She found this other one who's not me. Who's me now turns out to be also his brother.
So it's kind of like a similar story to this one.
And then instead of the monsters not letting him go, it says the island will not let him go. The TW go.
He wouldn't let him go?
They'll stay there because the islands will not let them go. All they just do is howl, and then the islands will not let them go.
So there were some similarities and also some differences because she did get taken away on a private boat, but instead of the wild things not letting her go, the islands wouldn't let her go. Very good connection. So let's look now at this worksheet really quick. Okay? So this says, when we were reading, we know that in books we have characters and we have settings. First, we're going to look at the setting. What was the setting of this story? What would you say was the setting that I could write on our paper, that we can write on our paper? Tatum, what is the setting?
Forest.
A forest. And if you were going to write a description, what would you write as your description? What would you write? Yes.
In imagination.
So, an imaginary forest where Max met who? The wild things. And if we had to describe what the forest looked like, what would we say? Were the trees large? Were they small? Were they lush? Were they green? Sophia?
Large, green, and tall. And also, really like.
The trees.
It was humongous.
So the trees were large, green, and tall. And why, when we're reading a story, is the setting important? Why do we want to know about the setting? What does it help us to do? What would it help us to do? What does the setting help us do?
Help you, know stuff that doesn't tell you.
Right, so sometimes it helps us to know things that, or imagine things that we might not think of in the book. Or if you're reading a chapter book and you don't have pictures like we had and where the wild things are, it helps you to imagine in your mind what the setting might look like. Abigail.
It helps you know like what the characters are.
Very good. It helps you to know where the characters are. So settings are an important part of reading a book, right? The other important part in reading a book is knowing about the characters. So in this book, we had pretty much only a couple of different characters. Who was the main character? Who was the primary character?
Wash my hands.
But we should be packing up.
Yes. So who is the main character of this book, Maxwell?
Me.
You, and what is your name? Max. So our main character's name is Max. And how would we describe Max? They used a word for him in the beginning of the book that he was what? It starts with an M. Yes. He's mischievous, and he gets into mischief, right?
No. I think they.
How else would you describe Max? Does he have a big,
No.
he has a big imagination. And how do we know that he has a big imagination?
Because he was like imagining like trees in his bedroom, not getting supper.
Because he imagined not getting supper, he imagined the trees and the wild things. And how do we know that he's mischievous or he likes to get into mischief? What was one of the things that he was doing that we said? Jola, what was one? He was chasing his dog with a fork. So besides Max, who were the other characters in our book? The what? Yes. Mm-hmm. The wild things. And what can we say about the wild things? They're big and hairy. And what else do we know about them? They're scary. Mistreated. Why would you say they were mistreated?
Because they were at first trying to be scary to Max, and then Max just like did this.
So what did he do with them? He trained them to be nice, right?
Mistreated because when they went to bed they didn't get any supper.
Right. They were mistreated because they said when they went to bed they didn't get any supper. But Max, like Cole said, helped to train them, and they became nice. And they became like, I think Caleb said that they became like his family while he was there until he got lonely and missed his family, right? Okay, well, thank you for listening to Where the Wild Things Are and going through the characters and settings.